Sentence. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Only, "She isn't where you think she is." I stared at the screen. A second message arrived immediately afterward. This one included a photograph. The moment I saw it, my heart nearly stopped, because the photo had clearly been taken less than an hour earlier. And it showed my wife, very much alive, very much awake, standing beside a man I had never seen before. A man who definitely wasn't Jake, and definitely wasn't Victor, meaning there was yet another secret, another person, another lie, and judging by the expression on her face in that photograph, she knew exactly how much trouble she was in. I must have stared at that photograph for a full minute, maybe longer. Everything around me seemed to fade away. The parking lot, the police officers, the sunrise, none of it felt real anymore. All I could see was her, my wife, standing beside a man I'd never seen before. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She wasn't hiding. If anything, she looked focused, determined, like someone in the middle of executing a plan. That bothered me more than I can explain, because for the past several hours I'd been imagining her running, panicking, falling apart. Instead, she looked composed, almost calm. Jake walked over. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. His reaction was immediate. "What the hell?" Exactly. What the hell? The photo had clearly been taken recently. The timestamp embedded in the image confirmed it. Less than an hour old. Meaning while police were searching, while people were looking for her, while everyone assumed she was desperate and alone. She was with someone. Someone new. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. She told him everything. I frowned. Everything? What did that even mean? Then another message. "You're looking at the wrong story." That sentence stuck with me, because it sounded deliberate. Like whoever was texting me wanted me to see something specific. Not just the affairs. Not just the money. Something else. I immediately tried calling the number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Nothing about this situation could ever be simple. Jake suggested forwarding everything to the detective. I agreed. Within minutes, the photo had been sent. The detective responded surprisingly quickly. His answer made my stomach tighten. He recognized the man, not by name, but from another investigation. Another investigation. Those words felt important, dangerously important. Before I could ask for clarification, he simply told me not to do anything reckless and to stay available. Not exactly comforting advice. After that, Jake and I finally went our separate ways. The entire situation felt bizarre. 24 hours earlier, he had been the guy sleeping with my wife. Now he was one of the only people who understood what was happening. Life is weird. I drove home. The house felt completely different, like someone else's home. Every room contained memories, and suddenly I couldn't trust any of them. The couch where we'd watched movies, the kitchen where we'd planned holidays, the bedroom where we'd slept beside each other for years. Every space felt contaminated. I barely made it through the front door before exhaustion hit me. Physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, mental exhaustion, everything at once. I sat down and stared at the wall. Hours passed. Maybe 3, maybe 4. I honestly don't know. Then another surprise arrived. Someone rang the doorbell. Normally I would have ignored it, but nothing about my life was normal anymore. When I opened the door, I found a woman standing outside. Mid-30s, dark hair, nervous expression. I had never seen her before, yet somehow she already knew who I was. "Mark." Yes. She looked uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Then she said, "I think your wife stole my identity." For a moment I thought I'd misheard. "What?" She repeated it, slower, more clearly, and suddenly I realized she wasn't joking. She wasn't exaggerating. She genuinely believed my wife had stolen her identity. The woman introduced herself as Sarah. Again, not her real name. Sarah explained she'd been contacted by investigators earlier that morning. Apparently, her information had appeared inside records connected to my wife. Bank applications, financial documents. online accounts, various paperwork. At first Sarah thought it was some clerical error. Then investigators showed her evidence. A lot of evidence. Names, signatures, records, copies of documents, all connected to my wife. I felt numb listening to her, because the story kept expanding. Every time I thought I'd reached the edge of the truth got bigger, darker, more complicated. Sarah eventually handed me a folder. "I thought you should see this." Inside were copies of emails, applications, messages, and photographs. One photograph in particular immediately caught my attention. It showed my wife sitting at a restaurant. Across from her sat the same mystery man from the earlier photo. The picture was several months old, meaning their relationship wasn't new, not even close. My heart sank. How many secrets did she have? How many lives had she been living simultaneously? Then I noticed something else. There was a child in the photograph. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. My wife was smiling at him. The mystery man was smiling too. The scene looked strangely normal, almost like a family. I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest, because I suddenly realized something. I knew absolutely nothing about this man. Nothing. And I definitely knew nothing about the child. Sarah noticed my expression, then quietly asked, "She never told you about them?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated, as if deciding whether to continue. Then she finally spoke, and the words that came out of her mouth completely shattered what little certainty I still had left. Because according to Sarah, the little boy in the photograph wasn't just some random child. And if she was right, my wife had been hiding a secret for nearly 8 years. For a second, I genuinely couldn't speak. I just stared at Sarah, then at the photograph, then back at Sarah. My brain was desperately trying to make sense of what she had just implied. The little boy, the mystery man, my wife, 8 years. None of it fit together. "What are you talking about?" Sarah looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure she should be the one telling me. Honestly, she probably shouldn't have been. But at that point, everyone seemed to know pieces of my wife's life except me. Sarah slowly sat down across from me. Then she slid the photograph forward. "The boy's name is Ethan." I stared at the picture. The kid looked happy, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding the adults in his life. "Who is he?" Sarah took a breath, then answered, "I believe he's your wife's son." The room went silent, completely silent. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because the statement felt impossible. My wife's son? No, absolutely not. I would have known, wouldn't I? How could someone hide a child for 8 years? The idea sounded insane. Yet 6 months earlier I would have said the same thing about secret apartments, multiple affairs, financial scams, identity theft, and hidden debts. Now, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Sarah quickly clarified. "I don't know if she's his biological mother." That wasn't exactly reassuring. Apparently investigators believed my wife had been financially supporting the child for years, secretly, through various accounts, various transactions, various arrangements. The records connected her repeatedly to the same boy, the same school, the same address, the same man, the mystery man from the photographs. I felt dizzy. My marriage was turning into some giant puzzle, and every new piece made the overall picture worse. Then Sarah handed me another document. School paperwork. Emergency contact information. My wife's phone number appeared on it. My wife's email appeared on it. Not once. Repeatedly. Year after year. I stared at the page, unable to process it, because there was no obvious explanation. Even if the boy wasn't hers, she was clearly involved in his life. Deeply involved. For years. And somehow she'd hidden it completely. Then another memory surfaced. One I'd forgotten until that moment. Several years ago, she'd occasionally disappear for entire weekends. Not often. Maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Her explanations always sounded reasonable. Family visits. Helping friends. Work conferences. Things like that. At the time, I'd never questioned it. Now every memory felt suspicious. Every unexplained absence suddenly carried new meaning. Sarah noticed my expression. You didn't know, did you? I shook my head. No. She looked genuinely sympathetic. That surprised me. Most people would have judged me for missing so many signs. Instead, she looked sad, like she'd seen situations like this before. Then she dropped another bombshell. The mystery man had apparently been around for nearly a decade. Longer than our marriage. Possibly longer than our relationship. I felt physically sick. Because that timeline changed everything. It meant he wasn't some recent affair. He wasn't some random guy. He was part of a much bigger story. A story I'd never been told. Then my phone rang. The detective. I answered immediately. His voice sounded urgent. Very urgent. Where are you? At home. Good. Stay there. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. What happened? There was a pause. Then, we found her. My heart stopped. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Despite everything she'd done, relief hit me first. Relief. Then fear. Then confusion. Is she okay? Another pause. A longer one. Too long. Finally he answered. Physically, yes. Physically. Not emotionally. Not legally. Physically. That choice of words immediately worried me. What does that mean? The detective exhaled slowly. Then said, she's asking for you. I frowned. Me? Only you. That made no sense. There were police, lawyers, investigators, people she'd been working with, people she'd lied to, people she'd stolen from. Yet she was asking for me? After everything? Why? The detective continued. There's something she wants to tell you. I almost laughed. Something she wanted to tell me. At this point, that could mean literally anything. A secret child. Another affair. Another identity. Another hidden debt. The possibilities were endless. Then the detective added something that immediately got my attention. According to her, everything you've discovered so far is only part of the story. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Why wouldn't it be? Every answer created more questions. Every revelation concealed another layer. Nothing was ever simple. Nothing was ever complete. Then came the sentence that changed the direction of everything. The detective said, she claims the person everyone believes is running this operation isn't actually her. The room seemed to tilt. What? She says someone else has been controlling everything. I looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Because if that statement was true, then the nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. And for the first time since this entire disaster started, I genuinely didn't know what to believe. At that point, I should have stopped believing anything my wife said. Seriously, any reasonable person would have. She'd lied about affairs. She'd lied about money. She'd lied about coworkers, friends, family emergencies, and entire sections of her life. Yet somehow, when the detective told me she claimed someone else was behind everything, I couldn't completely dismiss it. Maybe because the situation had already become so insane that nothing felt impossible anymore. Or maybe because a small part of me still wanted an explanation that made sense. I told Sarah what the detective had said. Her reaction was immediate. She shook her head. No. What do you mean? She's manipulating you again. Maybe. Honestly, that was the most likely explanation. But there was one problem. The fear I'd seen in my wife's face earlier. Not the fake tears. Not the dramatic excuses. The real fear. The kind that can't easily be performed. I kept thinking about it. Especially after discovering Victor's name throughout the journals. Especially after the men showed up at the apartment. Especially after the police reacted the way they did. Something wasn't adding up. A few hours later, I agreed to meet the detective. The meeting took place at a secure location. Not a police station exactly. At least not the kind I'd expected. The details aren't important. What matters is that she was there. My wife. For the first time since she'd disappeared. The moment I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked exhausted. Completely exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Messy hair. No confidence. No arrogance. No clever excuses prepared. Just exhaustion. For several seconds we stared at each other. Neither of us spoke. Then she quietly said, "You look terrible." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the absurdity was unbelievable. My entire life had exploded. Of course I looked terrible. "You stole from me." She lowered her eyes. "You cheated on me." No response. "You lied to me for years." Still nothing. Then finally, "I know." The words sounded hollow, like someone acknowledging a fact they couldn't change. I sat down across from her. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. Instead of defending herself, instead of blaming me, instead of lying, she apologized. Not the vague kind of apology people give when they want something. A real apology. At least it sounded real. "I destroyed everything." Her voice cracked. "I know that." Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction hearing those words. I didn't. Just sadness. Pure sadness. Because hearing her finally admit it didn't repair anything. It didn't undo the betrayal. It didn't bring back the marriage I thought I had. It simply confirmed that it was gone. Then she started talking. And what she told me was difficult to believe. According to her, the affairs were real. The lies were real. The money was real. The manipulation was real. She didn't deny any of it. Not even a little. But she claimed the financial operation had started differently than investigators believed. Years earlier she'd become involved with someone. Not romantically, professionally, or at least she thought so. A man who taught her ways to make money, ways to access opportunities, ways to exploit people. At first it was small. Minor schemes, minor deceptions. Nothing huge. Then the amounts got bigger. The risks got bigger. The lies got bigger. Eventually she found herself trapped. Or so she claimed. I listened without interrupting. Mostly because I wasn't sure whether I believed any of it. Then she said a name. A name I'd never heard before. Daniel. Not Victor. Not Jake. Daniel. According to her, Daniel was the person who truly ran everything. The person connecting people. Managing money. Creating fake identities. Directing operations. She described him almost like a ghost. Someone who was always present, yet never visible. Someone who avoided records, avoided photographs, avoided attention. Convenient, very convenient, which is exactly why I was skeptical. Then she said something unexpected. "Look in the folder marked green." I frowned. "What?" "The apartment." My heart skipped. The apartment. The detectives had already cataloged evidence there. Apparently one folder remained unopened because it was mixed in with unrelated materials. She insisted they retrieve it. A detective left the room. About 20 minutes later, he returned carrying a folder. Green. Exactly as she'd described. That got my attention. Inside were documents, photographs, records, names, lots of names. And near the back sat a photograph. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. Because I recognized one of the people immediately. Victor. The same Victor from the journals. The same Victor connected to debts and threats. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was another man. A man I recognized from somewhere else. It took several seconds to place him. Then realization hit me. The mystery man. The man from the photograph with my wife and the child. The same man. The room suddenly felt smaller. Much smaller. Because it meant the different parts of this nightmare weren't separate at all. They were connected. Every single one of them. The child. The money. The affairs. The debts. The fake identities. Everything. And then my wife said the sentence that changed everything again. "The boy isn't my son." I stared at her. Then at the photograph. Then back at her. Then who is he? She looked directly at me. For the first time all day. And quietly answered, "He's yours." For a few seconds, I genuinely thought she'd lost her mind. I just stared at her. Waiting for the punchline. Waiting for someone to explain. Waiting for reality to make sense again. Didn't. "The boy is mine?" My voice sounded distant. Almost like someone else was speaking. My wife nodded slowly. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. Completely impossible. I've never seen that kid before. I know. Then how could he be mine? She closed her eyes. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she opened them again and started talking. According to her, the story began nearly 9 years earlier. Before our wedding. Before most of the lies. Before the affairs. Back when our relationship was still relatively new. Apparently there had been a period when we'd briefly broken up. Not for long. A few weeks. Maybe a month. I remembered it. We'd been younger. Immature. We argued constantly. Eventually we reconciled and moved forward. At least that's how I remembered it. My wife claimed something happened during that time. Something she'd hidden ever since. A woman she knew became pregnant. The timeline overlapped with our breakup. There was uncertainty regarding the child's father. Confusion. Disputes. Mistakes. According to her, DNA testing had eventually been done. Privately. Years ago. And the results pointed to me. I stared at her. Unable to process the words. This couldn't be real. Could it? Then another problem appeared. A huge one. If that's true, why wouldn't anyone tell me? My wife looked down. The answer came quietly. Because I made sure they didn't. Silence. Complete silence. I felt sick. Actually sick. The room seemed to spin. What? Her voice cracked. I was afraid. Afraid. Such a small word. Such a pathetic explanation. Yet apparently that was it. She claimed she'd discovered the truth years earlier. Long before our marriage. Long before the child was old enough to understand anything. And she'd hidden it. Intentionally. Deliberately. For years. Because she was afraid I'd leave. Afraid I'd choose responsibility elsewhere. Afraid our future would change. So she buried the truth. Paid people. Manipulated situations. Controlled communication. Created barriers. Lie after lie after lie. One secret generating countless others. The detective sitting nearby looked stunned. Honestly, so did everyone else. Because even if half of what she said was true, the implications were enormous. Then I asked the question that mattered most. Does he know? The room became very quiet. My wife shook her head. No. That somehow hurt even more. Because there was a child out there. A real child. A kid who potentially had no idea who his father was. A kid who'd spent years growing up without answers. And if what she claimed was true, my wife had helped make that happen. I stood up. I needed air. Space. Distance. Anything. The detective followed me into the hallway. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then he finally said, "We don't know if it's true." That was important. Very important. Because at that moment I desperately wanted certainty. Instead I had another claim. Another secret. Another story. And the person telling it was the least trustworthy person I'd ever known. Eventually I sat back down. My wife looked exhausted. Defeated. Like someone finally running out of lies. Then she handed over one final piece of information. A location. An address. The address connected to the mystery man. The man from the photographs. The man connected to the child. The man connected to Victor. The man connected to everything. According to her, if anyone knew the complete truth, it was him. Not her. Not the police. Him. The detectives immediately started verifying information. Making calls. Checking records. The room became busy. Phones ringing. People moving. Questions being asked. For the first time since this nightmare began, events were moving faster than I could process. Then one detective received a call. His expression changed instantly. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. He hung up and looked directly at us. We found the address. My heart started pounding. Because suddenly this wasn't theory anymore. This wasn't speculation. This was real. The detective continued. And there's something else. Nobody spoke. The entire room seemed frozen. Then he delivered the news. The mystery man wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He wasn't disappearing. In fact, he had apparently been trying to contact authorities for weeks. And according to the information they had just received, he possessed evidence capable of exposing the entire operation. Every participant, every transaction, every secret, including things my wife herself apparently didn't know. The detective looked at me, then at my wife, then back at me, and quietly said, "If this evidence is real, everything you've been told so far may be incomplete." I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Every time I thought I'd reached the truth expanded. Every answer created 10 new questions. But one thing felt different now. For the first time since this started, we were getting close to the center of it all. And whatever waited there was about to change every assumption I'd made about my marriage, my past, and possibly even my own identity. By the time we arrived at the address connected to the mystery man, I felt like I'd aged 10 years in a week. Maybe more. The emotional exhaustion was impossible to describe. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been at the beginning. The anger had burned itself out. What remained was something heavier. Grief, confusion, disappointment, the feeling of mourning a life that had never truly existed. The address led to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing about it looked unusual. No dramatic security. No hidden compound. No obvious signs that this place sat at the center of a nightmare that had consumed so many lives. The mystery man opened the door himself. For privacy reasons, I'll call him Ryan. He looked exactly like he did in the photographs. Tired. Older than his age. The expression of someone carrying burdens for a very long time. The moment he saw my wife, his face hardened. Not hatred. Not fear. Just disappointment. Deep disappointment. Then he looked at me and quietly said, "I'm sorry." 3 simple words. Yet somehow they felt more sincere than every apology my wife had given me during our entire marriage. Inside the house, detectives began reviewing evidence. Boxes, documents, electronic records, years of information. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Ryan wasn't the mastermind. Victor wasn't the mastermind. Even Daniel, the shadowy figure my wife had described, wasn't the mastermind people imagined. The truth was less dramatic, and somehow sadder. There had never been one mastermind. There had been a network of people making bad decisions. Then worse decisions. Then catastrophic decisions. Each lie creating new lies. Each shortcut creating new problems. Each betrayal demanding another betrayal. Over time, everyone became trapped inside the system they helped create. My wife more than most. That didn't excuse her actions. Not even close. But it explained how things spiraled so far out of control. Eventually the question of the boy came up. The one question I couldn't stop thinking about. Ryan didn't avoid it. He didn't deflect. He didn't lie. Instead, he handed investigators documents. Real documents. Verified records. Including the DNA results. The results were genuine. I remember staring at the page for what felt like forever. Because after weeks of discovering lies, I expected another one. Instead, for once, the truth remained the truth. The boy was my son. There was no ambiguity, no uncertainty, no alternative explanation. Just reality. A reality hidden from me for nearly 8 years. I don't mind admitting that I cried. Not because I was ashamed. Because the weight of everything finally became too much. Years lost. Birthdays missed. Memories that should have existed but didn't. Moments I could never get back. My wife cried too. But by then, my focus wasn't on her anymore. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't revolving around her choices. It was revolving around mine. The following months were difficult. Very difficult. There were investigations, court proceedings, financial audits, endless paperwork, more revelations, more consequences. Many people faced legal problems. Some relationships ended. Others survived. The fallout touched dozens of lives. As for my marriage, it ended. There was never really another possible outcome. Too much damage had been done. Too much trust had been destroyed. People sometimes ask whether infidelity automatically ends a marriage. I don't think it always does. Some couples recover. Some rebuild. Some genuinely change. But recovery requires honesty. And honesty was the one thing our marriage never truly had. You can't rebuild a house when the foundation itself is rotten. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The process felt strangely unemotional. By that point, I'd already grieved the marriage. The paperwork merely made it official. The most important part of my life moving forward wasn't the divorce. It wasn't the investigations. It wasn't even the money. It was my son. Building a relationship with him wasn't instant. Couldn't be. We were strangers connected by blood and lost time. Trust takes time. Connection takes time. Relationships take time. But slowly, piece by piece, we started building something real. Something honest. Something neither of us had been given the chance to have before. Today, things aren't perfect. Honestly, they probably never will be. Some scars stay with you. Some questions never receive satisfying answers. Some betrayals permanently change the way you view the world. But I've learned something important through all of this. When someone repeatedly shows you who they are, believe them. Not who you hope they are. Not who they used to be. Not who they promise they'll become. Who they actually are. I ignored lies because they seemed small. I ignored red flags because I loved her. I ignored my instincts because facing reality felt harder than avoiding it. That mistake cost me years. If you're reading this and something feels wrong in your relationship, pay attention. Don't become paranoid. Don't become controlling. But don't ignore reality either. Trust is essential. Blind trust is dangerous. And if someone constantly makes you question your own memory, your own judgment, and your own perception of reality, that's not healthy love. Love shouldn't require you to abandon common sense. The final lesson took me the longest to learn. Losing the person you thought you loved is painful. Discovering that person never truly existed is even harder. But eventually I realized something. I didn't lose my future. I lost an illusion. And once I understood the difference, healing finally became possible. So that's my story. A story that started with a suspicious phone call and ended with a completely different life than the one I thought I was living. If you've made it this far, thanks for reading. And if you're currently going through something similar, document everything, trust evidence over excuses, and remember this: the truth has a strange habit of surfacing eventually.